Hello and welcome back to our class. This is the Introduction to Information Technology 2. This is our 7th meetings, and today we are going to focus more on what we have discussed in the previous meetings, which is the use of information technology for academic purposes. So in our previous meetings, we have learned that for the research for the knowledge of the information technology is one of the fundamentals and the cores of creative practice. So that's why this discussion is important. And before we begin with our topics today, let's review first about the meanings or the definition of our information technology. So to put it simply, information technology is what we know as the use of a computer, where we can create, process, store, retrieve, and exchange all kind of electronics data and information. Or to put it simply, we have what we call the three cores of information technology, which is the input, the process, and of course the output, where this is all happen in the information technology terms. So this is the core of the fundamentals and what we need to understand first before we explore deep or further into the uses of IT for academic purposes. And to also answer that, why academic purposes use of IT is important. For example, when we are going with our academic activities, whether us as a student, as a lecturer, or even as a researcher in the university, we tend to use or revolve ourselves, our academics activities, using information technology. For example, when we are going to publish our research, our result of our studies in a form of paper, we tend to find electronic journals, electronic proceedings, or even in today's pandemic situation, we use a live conference, whether it is using conference tools such as Zoom, or maybe if you prefer Google, you use Google Meets, or even other tools that revolve from information technology. So that's why it is important for us to focus and discuss whether how we can manage to utilize, to understand the fundamentals and use it in our academics uses. Even though that in the focus of our courses, we want to focus on the creativity itself. But based from what I explained earlier, that this is what we needed to do, because this is also a fundamental of the creative practice. So let me give you an example in Indonesian case study. So information technology for academic uses in Indonesia, especially in higher education, we have two sides: advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages is when we are going with higher education, it learn new information technologies that remain uncertain, even what we call unsettling, because we don't know the power of the new information technologies. While even this left us from some doubt, but it also has a potential to enhance teaching and learning. For example, um, today we have Kampus Merdeka curriculum, or in English, the freedom of campus. It is a new uses of curriculum that also revolve using information technology, but it has a problem where it is uncertain. Some of the educator, whether it is a students, a teacher, or even lecturers, they seems to doubt the uses of information technology, because what we know today, when we are going to use information technology. Even for example, in pandemic, we tend to see a low on learning outcomes for the students. Some of the students couldn't be able to gain what they wanted to gain in education using information technology, because we don't have the power, we don't have the experience to use information technology to develop our skills in academic or even in educational uses. So even though we have that kind of problem, we also have the potential to learn, to get more experience and enhance our capability, whether it is us as a students or even as a lecturer itself. So we have no agreement on what could be the result of the new technology, but it's also have the potential to boost the academic productivity itself. So we are taking a risk, but not really a huge risk, but in terms of area, safety measurement area of risk. That's why it is important for us to have a valid goal where it could be used as an enhancement. Even we can use it as a subsidized technology to be more traditional. So we have a safety measurement where we limit ourselves, how to limit the uses of information technology, and if the outcomes is bad, we tend to substitute it with something more traditional, such as the old uh, academic learning where we have to meet face to face. So it's also important. Talking about enhancement itself, we can learn from a study case where we are going to enhance productivity with information technology. So using information technology to enhance productivity, we we can increase the ratio of capital cost to labor cost in the academic budget. So we still working on the three things where we still focus on our capital cost, but we also focus on our labor cost, but also we are going to focus on the academic budget as well. So we not just work tirelessly but without thinking at all. We sometimes need to do academic activities. For example, in huge companies such as if I can say in manufacturing or in food and beverages such as P&G, they have a division called R&E, R&D, sorry. So it's a division called research and development where they have a budget to do academic activities. This is what we do to try to uh, learn about our mistakes, or maybe making a new products, or trying to figure out where the market will lead our products. So that's why it would be a good thing to do. But one thing you need to keep in mind, and when we are going to enhance our productivity using academic activities, we need to know whether all of our cost or overall cost can be reduced, since uh, even though the academic budget, academic activities is important, it would be better if we manage to get a sustainable labor cost before we are going with the academic activities, because academic activities doesn't really comes with uh, direct money, if I can say it in a harsh word, because academic activities doesn't really show how it could benefit to the company. That's why it may need sometimes, or even it could fail. That's why you need to understand that this is could be an optional activities if the labor or the main activities has not been fulfilled. That's why you need also to keep in mind that larger capital labor ratios represent a shift away from the handicraft mentality, because as I said before, we cannot make a good incomes when we are trying too hard in academic activities. So we need to focus more on how to get income first before we try to focus on academic activities. We can do it later when we are bigger and when we have a huge team, or even we have a huge investor as well. Talking about our investment, or whether we got an investor for our creative activity or academic activities, we also need to know that there are three major advantages when we are going with using the investment for the new technology. Because first of all, when we are going with investment, we need to make sure that our investment are spent into our activities, such as investment in the new technologies, distributing computing capacity across our campus if we are going with the academic use. Also, we need to able to link or to connect our faculty, our major, with the students as well with one of another. If you realize one of the biggest social media, which is Facebook, it was started with the link or the connect between students in the campus, and it's also become one of the huge leap into what it has become today, where they are going with the new name, which is Meta. It's also on activities where generally we could provide the necessary IT infrastructure that is needed in our academic scenario. So there would be a lot of issues that we can get when we are going to practice in the investment of new technology in academic uses. But we also need to know that doing this kind of things is a part of innovations, where we can get not only successful in innovations but also consequences that may arise in the future. So that's why it is important for us to apply these three major focus in mind, where we are going to apply IT for academic uses. The first one is the difference in cost between labor and technology base. So we need to know that real labor costs tend to rise with the economy situation, but technology-based costs tend to decline. This is because the activity in technology-based use what we know as learning curve effects. So it scale economics in production and continued innovation. So this what we need to keep in mind, because when we are going to invest our money in technology-based costs, we need to make sure that the economy is stable. We don't want to focus our investment in learning when we are still in the pandemic situations. That's why we need to make sure when the economy is stable, then we try to increase the technology's share of cost. And we need to know that doing this will also reduce overall cost growth for our activities, especially in academic activities. So, given the different chill growth rates of labor and technology, one can expect positive long-term returns on investment, or what we call ROI, even when returns are negligible during the first few years. This is what we need to keep in mind, because what we call an investment, it would take some time until it's fruitful. Even uh, if we know sometimes, uh, for example, an e-commerce where we know today, big, something like Shopee, the first thing they do when they are trying to introduce their company, their e-commerce, they spend a lot of money, investment in testing and marketing, and also doing technology based activities, academic activities, where they try to learn how to meet the requirement of the market itself. So that's why in 2 to 3 years they spend a lot of money. For example, when they are trying to invite a new potential sellers to their e-commerce, they give a free transportational cost when somebody buys their uh, items in the e-commerce. But after 3 years, they are starting to get their long-term return on investment, and that's a huge one. That's why they are still sustainable until today. The second one is the technology-based solutions are more scalable. This is what we need to understand, because technology-based solutions also tend to be more scalable than labor-intensive ones, because labor is something that we do commonly and generally. Nothing change. Even we as one that do, for example, academic, when we learn, we do it repeatedly year after years. That's why it doesn't really scale into something else. But if we are using technology based solutions in our academic, such as when we are using uh, online meetings, it could scale into something else. Maybe in the future we will have a more physical look like, where we can do activities in more and more great way in communication. We don't know how much scalable the technology solutions is, especially the things that we can do in the future. So we need to expect that in the focus of the students, additional students could be accommodated maybe in a lower cost with the technology than with traditional teaching methods in the future, of course. For now, I don't think the cost is low. I don't know in other countries, but us in Indonesia, when we are trying to use Zoom, or maybe we are trying to use Microsoft Teams, it really doesn't seen as lower cost. But hopefully in the future we can get lower costs in the use of technology based solution, because right now the technology based solution that has been done by the huge company is still on the investment stage. So we will see later in the future whether it would be a good one or maybe it would be a higher cost. But based from what uh, I observe when it comes to the cost in technologies, for example in online games, when we are buying and selling, so we have seen some progress where the cost or the price of the games that sold online at, for example, at Steam or at Epic Games, they are divided between country prices because they have found out some algorithms that show that not all of the people in different country could share the same experience. Maybe in United States or in England for a price of $10 is cheap for them, but in small countries like us in Southeast Asia, $10 is a huge cost because of the currency exchange. That's why they try to divide it, not looking into the currency exchange, but more as a gross product activity. So they can target more and better consumer when they are going with that way. Hopefully, as in academics, it would be a better things to do and develop more into a better solution with a lower cost of technology. So the third one is where we have to think a little bit of critical when we as let's say a manager in the academic activities where we wanted to choose whether we have to provide a new technology or we wanted to develop our old professor that may be not capable on using IT technology. In these topics, we need to make sure that we choose to develop new technologies because maybe it wouldn't be cheap, but it would be easier and more predictable than when we are going to develop our old professor, old generation to try and to push them into using high information technology that they cannot be capable. And even though that they are capable, it won't be a good investment because maybe they will change they will resign, or maybe they will have their old days and they cannot teach anymore. So that's why we need to focus on retraining of information technology, then focus on developments of our labor. It could be also a solution when the idea that we develop that could also help the labor, in this case the professor itself. Many of the technologies that we have developed in common days, we know that the IT is somewhat friendlier than what it used to be, because even old people could use or operate that information technology. So we could also focus on that kind of development focus as well. So we also need to know that within it limits, the department will gain a larger zone of flexibility as the capital labor will also grows, which what I mean is the ratio of capital labor. So keep that in mind. Next, let's discuss furthermore into things that need to be observed when we are going with academics activities using information technology. The first one is the demand. The demand for IT based, whether it's for teaching or learning programs, it will grow substantially and probably exponentially over the next decade. Right now, us in Indonesia, we have been funded by the government to learn in IT-based learning, and even us as the citizen get paid for that. A lot of people wanted to join that kind of uh, learning programs because it is what we know as something that gonna be huge someday. Probably in the future we won't be focused more on face-to-face learning activities, but we are we can learn from anywhere. We can have a lot of change to do anything that we wanted to do in academic activities, not only restrained on teaching or studying, but also in researching. So this could also become a new knowledge base, information that could offer an economical means. And this is what happening in education in Indonesia. And based on our observation, it also the same in other countries as well. So this is what we need to observe in the future, because this could potentially become a chance for us to develop further in the use of IT in academics. The second one is what IT will become in teaching and learning. Whatever the response of traditional people, institution, traditional universities, it won't stand like that forever. There would be a change of generation, and right now there has been a change from the boomers generation into millennial generation in the executive level, and hopefully it would increase the use of technologies, advantages, uses, and also developments, because what we know that from the millennial generation, they tend to use IT frequently rather than the boomers generation. And in the future, when we are going with the Z generation, it would even become a bigger probability, bigger changes in the IT sites as well, because even the Z generation couldn't live without the IT. It has become their third heart. Their second heart. They cannot live without it, and it would represent an a fundamental change in the basic of technology, especially on what our topic is all about today, which is the academic activity. The next one is the role of information technology in education. So we need to know first that both education and learning are lifetime processes. So it doesn't stop until we die. For example, I myself as an IT enthusiast, when I try to do some programming project, sometimes I stumble upon some problems that I couldn't get a solution on, even if I experiment things on. And I think many of you, if you're a programmer, has stumbled upon this kind of problem as well. And when we went to bed and we dreamed about it, and simply the solution pop up in our head, and we woke up and we tried, experiment it, and it worked. That's one of example that even though then we are sleeping, our brain still working and even learning. That's why this education is lifetime processes. So it would also be the same with the information technology, even better. Even us as human that could stop learning when we die, the information technology carries on through generation of generation. So what we have today is an outcome not only from our generation, but an all generation way higher above us. So they have no limit on when they are started or when they will stop, unless when we have an Armageddon, and or maybe some kind of panic situation. Actually, we had centuries ago some things like the library of Alexandria that were burned, and a lot of science was uh, deleted. That's could happen, but even though that those kind of situations happen, we still manage to develop a better knowledge, and in this case the information technology, and this will help us in the changing the way we live. So education would also provide us with information, and then we have to learn, and also we need to process this information for our use as well. It is a important things that we need to do, which is to make education accessible at any time by everyone, and this will help in reducing on the level of illiteracy, because this has become a huge problem in our society because of illiteracy, especially when it comes to health illiteracy. Sometimes even the common people that doesn't study about the health, they even debate the doctors, and many lives were lost because of that. So that's why we need to make sure, by combining our education, our knowledge, our academic activities with information technology, we could increase and help people in reducing I won't say illiteracy anymore, but more than idios idio idiotic idiotic activities that sometimes the society doesn't really know that they do that. So uh, I managed to merge the role of information technology in education into 7 way of role. So let's start with the first one. Information technology has made both teaching and learning easier. So we had made a breakthrough in using IT that we leave behind the traditional method of long boring lectures that we actually doesn't need to do. But still there are some of the society thinks that we need to do that, even though that it doesn't do anything effectively or efficient. For example, we the old traditional ways that wanted us to remember all of the formulas or of the things, but not on all of the fields, but the common fields of our study doesn't really need us to remember the formulas, the code, especially in IT. We don't need to remember the code because we can simply Google, or we have the database to find the command prompt for our programming, the comments or the syntax on our programming language, or even in another field of study such as in agriculture, where we have to remember how to plant something. But today we have the IT, where we can access whether how to plant a certain kind of plants, and even another things that require us to remember things that for me myself it is a boring things to do. That's why using IT like this could create an interesting learning activities. We can make audio and visual presentation that is interesting to our students, where they could keep engaged, or we can simply focus on the visual activities that could show better and make our students understand easier of the courses that we taught in. And we doesn't really need to focus on the lecturer itself when they are talking, but by using presentation such as something like this, they could read, they could imagine their self in how they could manipulate or even understand the concepts of the courses that has been given by their lecturers. Besides this kind of things, we can also give a new methodology that use IT, that something like an interactive session between the faculty member. So maybe we can watch animated videos, or using information technology digitalized, so it could make the learning process easier. And it doesn't stop from that, because what I said earlier, the potential is limitless. The second one, using IT, it helps us keep track of records. So back on old days, we could have problems even between teachers and students, when the teachers simply forgot to grade their students, or they lost their documents. So by using IT, we solve that kind of problems, even though that there are also new problems that arise because of that. Maybe in terms of security, where some students could become bad students when they're trying to steal the password and try to manipulate their own grades. But we managed to overcome that kind of problems, because IT has given rise to various tools and applications, where it could be used as administrative tool for our academics. And teachers, for this example, could also become the administrator to track their progress of each individual's faculty members, and even the third parties such as the parents that could be informed using information technology, whether it is to inform them about their achievement or even for their bad grades. So it could become one of the great monitoring tool that could also help them to see and analyze whether they are weak in certain subjects, and provide them some uh, other solution using IT, whether it is an extra time of learning or even extra notes that doesn't really need to be written down but just to be read. So IT has saved the faculty member using this solution. So it would become a greater method comparing to the old method that we used in the old days. The third one is how IT has successfully made digitalization activities, such as transforming books that usually be print using paper, using a lot of trees into digital books, or what we know as ebooks, PDFs, or whatever that we used to call it. It helped the the communities by going green. They doesn't really need to print another books as well, and it become a better solution because uh, even today schools and universities has digitalized their classroom, so they encourage their students to use IT to submit their tests, homework, and assignments. Hence, uh, they doesn't print anymore, and the teachers also promote the use of ebooks to read lectures. And this kind of ebooks or digital books can be read anywhere, in maybe in a cafe where you are drink or hanging out with your friends, on the train, or at home, according to the convenience. And they doesn't really need to do it in the library. But yeah, we know that it could be also disadvantages because the library facilities could become unpopular because of it. But it's increasing or advantaging in a good way, because this kind of advancement has played an important role in protecting our environment, as fewer books means less cutting downs of the trees. The fourth one is information technology has made education fun and entertaining. Modern world today know every students know how to use computers, tablets, and mobile phones. Even for example, uh, education, for me as well as a programmer, mobile programmer, I managed to make an educational game in classic role-playing games, and it focused on studying history, especially in Indonesian culture, and it has become a great tools to help people and to help the other to study. And it has become a good things, and it is fun and it is entertaining, and it doesn't uh, make and become a burden to them, because by using this kind of things it become a positive manners. They can be introduced using tablets and PCs in the classroom for the purpose of interactive sessions, rather than just listen to your teachers to talk, and even uh, making some boring lectures that we know in the old day. Even we can use the social media, such as using Facebook in the groups, WhatsApp, private classroom, to better communicate. It is limitless, so you can use whatever you prefer. And it is a good thing that we can use and become a solution for today's IT in academics, where it is fun and entertaining. The next one is information technology has made education accessible for all the students. This is true even to some of the students that are not capable to access education. For example, someone who has this disability where they cannot do study in traditional classroom methodologies. Now, with the help of information technology, it allows them to do what they wanted to do what they wanted to learn, even though that it's still limited to some degree. But we know even someone who has the something like an eye disability or blindness, they can uh, use information technology that help them by using the voice command, voice to text, or text to speech, or another information technology that could help them. And this is come with even a free access for all of the students that really need this kind of uh, accessible function for their educational purposes. It's also become a good role of IT where it's easier to access, to research, and get information. We remember maybe a few years back, the student has to spend hours and hours to the library to search citation, to read books. And today, thanks to Google, we can search the information easily, even though that we have some uncommon word command to try to find the information that we needed. Even we search articles using maybe for us as human it won't be recognizable or we won't understand, but thanks to the development of technologies, they understand us and they give even a better and comprehensive and understandable articles that we need, articles or even information that we need, and it become a great one as well. The seventh one, the IT also enable us to be able to form group for assignment easier rather than in traditional classroom where we don't know our friend uh, who is capable on who, and we cannot give or uh, able to perform a better result because of this kind of limitation. It also made confusion because every student has got their own opinion. Oh, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't like him, I don't like her, or I wanted to be with him because he is my bestie, my best friend, or something like that. But thanks to information technology now, we can gather data on, even automatically we can by systematically choose preference our own group members. We can also have information technology to discuss or conduct it in some kind of social media forms or using tools and application where we can upload our tasks and collaborate with one another in a completely better manner where they doesn't have to fight, debate, or doing something that we really doesn't need to do. So that's why it's also important for us to know the potential of information technology for academic uses. So there are two things. First one, how the IT offers economic scales that scalable after a period of time it becomes a huge return of investment because the front end investment, the cost of usage per incremental students, if we say it like that, but I think it's still a bad word because in institutional or education, it doesn't really have to become a profit way because we have to focus more on how the education becomes a non-profit academic activities. But we may say it this way, but hopefully it doesn't become one of our goals in on or our objectives. So moreover, this kind of investment or this kind of activities could access to a very large amount of information that can be obtained at a lower incremental cost. That's why I said earlier that we doesn't really have to focus on profit in academic uses, because uh, it should be a non-profit activities, but it does come with a huge benefits in profits. But hopefully we doesn't focus on that, because it could disgrace our principle in education. So the second one is the the potential of IT that could offer mass customization, because technology allows faculty to accommodate individuals' differences in students' goal, learning styles, abilities, while providing improved convenience for both students and faculty at the same time. Anytime, any place basis. Just as we know the technology, how the technology work. So we also need to understand that where the situation of our community today, where in industrial terms, in modern industrial, we are in the fourth stage, where we call it industrial revolution 4.0. So it suggests a departure of traditional handicraft mode of education, where the faculty learning curves are shallow and capital offers little leverage beyond the traditional physical plant. But whereas the original industrial revolution led to undifferentiated mass-produced outputs, where it gives modern information-driven revolution permits production to be adapted to the needs of each customer. Perhaps this is what we know potential through such tools as the internet and the various online databases, where it is accessed in a huge quantities of information. As system becomes increasingly sophisticated, this would make sure that IT will provide a growing capacity to navigate among such information resources at low cost. It would also become a common things that give an ease limit of time and space for educational activities. The students can try to relax or having other uh, better activities, productivity that doesn't need to focus on education at all, because it could be achieved in a shorter time than what we do back in the traditional way of education. So it would also become a state with an extensive distance learning programs. Students doesn't need to go to the classroom. We can do it anywhere we wanted, as long as it doesn't uh, as long as the government allow it. This will also bring the best lectures to students using multimedia anytime, anywhere, so that like the recordings of the country's most celebrated artists, those of the best will drive out those of the merely good. So in the end, the IT would enable a self-paced learning with sensitivity to different learning styles and continuous assessment of students' progress as well. And this would prove to become a great profit, not only using a strategy for IT-based development in academic, but also to increase the volume of students. The bigger the capacity, or higher curriculum standard, or even the content faculty, that less possessive. I know that some of you may agree with this, because uh, we know that a lot of universities, schools that seems like possessively to their students, they cannot do this, they cannot do that. And by using IT, we do realize it would become a better freedom for the student, but hopefully still in a controlled way that uh, we teach ourselves as a student to be self-aware and to know whether it is a good thing or a bad thing to do. So by understanding the roles of the IT, we do realize that we have some barriers of adoption, because beyond this kind of innate limitation in IT, a host of barriers stemming principally from the conservative tendency of colleges, your old teachers, or the universities themselves inhibit the full-scale adoption of IT-based strategies in traditional institutions. We could maybe argue, debate, or that much of higher education remain characterized it would become a huge and hot topics between the students and the teachers, but we need to realize that this could also become of the barrier of adoption in implementation and it IT-based strategies, such as the traditional academic values, appropriate consideration of learning productivity, hollow with collegiality, or even the little attention to teaching and learning processes. You can understand this later in the lecturer's note that I will give to you in the website, so you can learn more about the barrier of adoption and try to overcome and try to figure out how we can implement this kind of IT-based strategies in academic environment. So I would also like to give you some tips into ways to increase productivity in academic. So we know that economics define productivity as the ratio of outputs to inputs. So the better the higher the outputs than the input, the better the productivity is, or more generally as the ratio of benefits to cost. Productivity can be improved by one, we can doing more with more, so we can produce significant greater benefits and encompassing quality and well as quantity at modestly greater unit cost. We could also do doing less with less, spending significantly less money while limiting benefits reductions to modest levels. But by doing so, maybe some of your friends or your colleagues will say you are so cheap, or yeah, it comes with disadvantages as well, but you might overcome that. But it would also become one of the last thing where doing more with less, where producing greater benefits while spending less money. Productivity also can increase by improving quality at the same unique cost. So the third option would be the better option if you can, but if you can't, you can do the second one or the first one. But hopefully you can do all of them, because this is one of the best strategy. The disadvantages doesn't come with a higher risk or higher price. Maybe the second one would make some bad comments to you, but it doesn't really gonna affect the activities that you do, but more likely to be just some lifetime drama, so it would be fine. So based from what they learn, let me give you the conclusion, where information technology not only playing the major role for both the students to achieve a better understanding, learning and education, while teachers could also keep themselves up to date and improve their teaching skills if they can remember that some teachers could be old professor could improve themselves in IT, so we better choose the IT over the old professor. But whether or not one agrees that today colleges and universities have worthwhile core of value that should be protected, it will become a debate. It would be a healthy debate, but it could be one of the activities that develop and increase our academics further to the next level, and hopefully it could increase and develop and be implemented into a better future using information technology. So if college and university fails to adapt effectively, other kinds of institution will take up the challenge. So would say do or die. So that's all for today. See you again next week and bye bye.